welcome to the Art of Being Human. I've decided today that I'm going to do a little review. We've been talking a lot about anxiety, how to avoid it, what to do when you have it, and the whole focus of this segment of these groups of shows that I'm doing now is to help you to overcome the anxiety that you feel. And I really think that one key is to understand, first of all, what it is. So I've decided today I'm going to do a little review of the types of anxiety, what it does to you, and I'm going into the defense mechanisms. I'm not going to really discuss them. I'm basically going to define them because I've already discussed them and I just don't want to go over the same thing over and over again, but I want to put it together for you so you can kind of reach back in your memory and decide what's good for you to remember. And so this is the way that I'm going to do it. So first of all, what I'm going to do is show you, and I did a group of charts, nothing fancy. I just wrote it down in larger lettering, so maybe it'll help trigger your memory. I'm going over the different types of anxiety first. Now you need to remember that if you are a very anxious person, and some people are, that you may be depressed too. I'm not going over the depression today, but just the anxiety, but just as kind of to inform you. Everybody has blue days. Everybody goes up and down. But some people have chronic depression, and that's more deep, this clinical depression, which is more deep and it's harder to handle. And then some people go further and they become bipolar, and they have very deep depressions, and that's hard to manage, but it can be managed. If you are a person that has depression, you probably have anxiety too. There are some people that don't, but most people do. And while I'm on it, I want to mention Mother Teresa. When Mother Teresa was in her professional life and she was doing all this work that she was doing with the really poor people, for most of it, she was seriously depressed. People don't know that. I did some research on her, and there's a whole book that's been written about her, and she was depressed most of the time. There was a 2-week period when she got great relief from a depression, and she went into a very peaceful, joyous state. So I really think, and this is just without being able to prove it, I really think she may have been bipolar, but she got stuck somehow in the depression part of the cycle because she only had those 2 weeks when she felt terrific and she thought she was healed and she thought she was over the depression, and then she went right back into the depression and it never remitted. So for most of her professional life she was seriously depressed. Now I think that if she had gone to a psychiatrist, if she'd gone to a medical professional, they could have taken her out of it. With medication and therapy they really could have helped her a whole lot. So my hope is, and I hope that you realize, that if you are stuck in serious depression or if you are stuck in a lot of anxiety, there's hope for you. It can be treated. It's very treatable. And people have a lot of success with medication and therapy, and the combination, usually you need a combination of the two, and people get a great deal of relief from it. But she didn't do that. She went to her spiritual advisors for prayer, and she just, depended upon that, but that wasn't enough to get her out of it. If she'd had medical treatment, she could have gotten out of it, or at least been a lot more comfortable. But at any rate, she was very, very depressed. Now, most people who have depression, they're going to cycle. They're going to be up, they're going to be down. They're going to be up, they're going to be down. With her, it was chronic and more or less unremitting. So my take on it was that she may have been bipolar and that she got stuck in the depression part of the cycle and she became unipolar depressed. There is a condition called unipolar depression. It's like bipolar, but you stay on the bottom part. You don't raise up to the part in which you're not depressed. You don't go into the joyous side. And it's just most people go up and down. Even people who are not seriously depressed, but they have a few blue days here and there, they usually go up and down. But my focus today is going to be more or less on anxiety and what we can do, our defense mechanisms, our personality disorders, and things like that, just as a kind of review of what we've been over. So let's start with this first chart. The types of fear that we have. I hope this will be clear enough for you to see. I'm going to read it off the chart. Now here again, I'm more or less defining it rather than discussing it. So the types of fear that people run into. First of all, there's something called GAD, G-A-D, Generalized Anxiety Disorder. This is when you're afraid of anything and everything. You just have a lot of anxiety. You don't know why, but suddenly you'll be scared to death. And that's what it is. And it's hard to put up with because it makes you very, very uncomfortable. But as I said before, it's very, very treatable. Then there's anticipatory anxiety. A lot of people fear anticipatory anxiety. This is the fear of something specific that's coming up. Supposing like you have an operation coming up, or you have a dental appointment and you're afraid of dentistry, or you're going to be giving a speech and you're afraid to speak before the public. All kinds of things, but there's specific things that are actually going to happen, and you become very afraid of those things that are going to happen. They're already scheduled to happen. So it's not something that you're just scared because you're scared and you don't know why. It's something that's coming up that you know and that it is, you know. Some people get so terrified before they give a public speech, or they get so terrified before they have a solo that they have to play, or something like that. I remember when I was in high school, public speaking never bothered me, but I remember when I was in high school, someone was supposed to give a speech. It was like an orientation, and you know, people were discussing different clubs and different societies and different kinds of things you could get into as a high school student, special clubs and meetings. And there was a person that was afraid, terribly afraid of giving a speech about the French club. And she came to me and she says, "Would you talk about the French club?" Well, that was great, except I wasn't taking French. But she says, "I'm just plain too scared to do it." So I said, okay. So I got up there and I pretended I knew a lot about the French language. I knew nothing. And I gave a whole speech about the French club. And the teacher said that was really terrific. But of course I wasn't in the French club and I wasn't taking French at the time. I did take French later, but not at the time that I was doing the speech. But there was anticipatory anxiety on her part. Something coming up that she knew she was supposed to do, and she just was too afraid to do it. So that's anticipatory anxiety. Now, panic attacks are sudden, severe panic, not knowing where they come from. Suddenly you feel like you're so panicked you can't stand it. And some people start screaming, they start running around, maybe they hold it in, but it's sudden, severe panic. Those are panic attacks. Very, very difficult. I think of all of them, that's probably about the worst. Then you have the phobias. Phobias are a special fear of something. Maybe you're afraid of going over a bridge. Maybe you're afraid of climbing stairs. Maybe you're afraid of being outside in bad weather. It's something specific that you're afraid of. If there's any good part of it, you're not fearful at any other time. If you're afraid of dogs, you have a phobia about dogs, you're afraid of dogs, you're not afraid unless you see a dog. So it's limited. It's limited to what you are afraid of, and you're not afraid at any other time. A lot of people have phobias. Now, social phobias are being afraid, sometimes it's called social anxiety, being afraid of social events. Going to parties, going to picnics, getting together in groups to do a certain thing, maybe to go for a swimming thing, or to go out to a concert, or whatever it is. Terrible fear of social things. Then there is the obsessive compulsive, which is also called OCD, when you have to do things over and over again. You get down, you're driving, you get down a mile or two. Did I really turn off the stove? I don't remember if I turned off the stove. You turn back, you have to look and you have to make sure that you really did turn off the stove. So you're compulsive. Everything has to be in order, and you're fearful if you think anything is out of order. So, you know, if you fear that you didn't turn off the stove, if you fear that you didn't turn down the heat, and then you want to check it over and over again to make sure it was done, that's OCD. obsessive compulsive. Then there's PTSD, post-traumatic stress. It's fear from a traumatic event. You either became involved in a traumatic event, something happened to you, you were in an accident, or you got mugged on the subway, or something happened to you, or you saw it happen to somebody else. Either one can give you this kind of fear, PTSD. A lot of soldiers come back with it. A lot of soldiers and people who have seen too much and done too much, and it becomes a real problem because it's almost impossible for them to live a normal life with it. But here again, it's treatable. And then I brought up cold emotion. It's due to medication. You're not fearful because you're facing something bad or reliving your bad situations as you do when you're in trauma. You've taken some medication, and one of the side effects is it makes you jittery. So it has an unreal quality about it. But it is anxiety, so I do bring it up. So those are what they are, the major fears. Generalized anxiety disorders, anxiety about everything, anticipatory anxiety, panic attacks, phobias, social phobias, obsessive compulsive disorder, PTSD, and cold emotions. Now, what I want to go through next, and remember, this is just a review, what I want to go through next are defense mechanisms and the adjustment mechanism. And remember, the definition is that they help you not to face stress head on. They help you to buffer your stress so you can handle your stress, and it's not so horrible for you just to handle it because it kind of acts as a buffer. And these are the ones that we worked with. There are about 10 of them, and here again I'm basically going to define them and not really discuss them. One was working harder to meet a goal, and it's usually not successful, but sometimes is successful. You can't depend upon it. Repression is when your brain forces you to forget traumatic events. That's very common. We all do it to a certain extent. Regression is when you're acting younger than you are. Sometimes it becomes very awkward and very unusual for people to see. Rationalization is when you have reasons for not being able to reach your goal or reasons for poor behavior. Identification is when you try to be like a person that you admire in every single way that you can, dressing like them, talking like them, having a personality like them, your politics is like them, everything that you do is like them. So that is part of it. Now I have another page here of it. Projection is when you take the problems that you have or personality characteristics that you have and you place them on another person. In other words, I'm not argumentative, but so-and-so is. In other words, you just project all of your issues onto somebody else, and so it keeps you feeling free of those things, but you really do have those things. You're just not acknowledging them. Compensation, if you can't do something, then you do something else. This is a healthier way of handling stress. Attention getting is doing things to get attention, and sometimes that gets a bit bizarre and a little awkward. It depends upon how far it goes. Dissociation is when you're daydreaming, or it's like an alternate reality. You're either daydreaming or you're out, and you space out. Basically, you space out, and you're not living in your own reality. Withdrawal, which is one of the worst, you just withdraw from life. No friends, no activities, no nothing. You just withdraw because you feel safer if you're not involved with anybody or anything. Those are the basic 10 defense mechanisms or adjustment mechanisms that we have already gone over. Remember, this is just a review, and I just basically wanted to define them. The reason I want to define them, I think that if you know what you are, if you can tag into it, then you can make changes and you can feel better about yourself. and it'll help you to cope maybe in a better way. A lot of people just don't know what they are like to other people. They don't know what they present to other people. They know what they are inside for themselves, but they don't realize how they're reacting to other people and how people are responding to them. They just don't get it. If it's something that you can nail, if it's something that you can talk about, you can think about, and you realize about yourself, it doesn't mean you're a bad person, but it means that if you need to make a change, then it's easier to make a change because you have some kind of a reality, some kind of a handle as to what you're like and what happens to you and what you're afraid of, and then you can start working on it and you can start making it better. Okay, personality disorders, we discussed them. And they are to the point of impairment. Usually people who have them, they are impaired. They're not functioning as normal people. And so they become a lot more serious than the defense mechanisms are. Now, paranoid personality disorder, where you're suspicious, where you're distrusting, whether you just don't trust anybody, and it gets to be a serious thing. The schizoid personality is where you're detached. You don't have social relationships. You don't want social relationships. You're afraid of them. And that gets to be very difficult for you, especially in a working situation. And anyone who's dealing with you has that same problem because they are dealing with someone who wants to detach. So they might want to have a relationship with you or at least be friends, and you make that impossible. Then there's a schizotypal personality with distorted thoughts, poor relationships, being eccentric. Very, very hard to have a personal relationship with a person who has this problem. The antisocial personality is when a person disregards other people, they violate their rights, they violate their personal space, they don't care, they're just antisocial, they don't want to have anything to do with anybody. In some ways these things are kind of related, but this is a disregard for others and violating others' rights. The borderline personality disorder is very impulsive, very unstable, and they're very difficult to deal with, and they usually have a lot of problems when dealing with other people because they're not dealing with people from a rational kind of way. They just can't do that. Now, the histrionic personality is where we have excessive emotions, seek attention, and a lot of crying, a lot of screaming, a lot of emotional expression, too much so to the point where it's difficult for them, it's difficult for people dealing with them. You know, they're very upset all the time. You never know when they're going to blow off steam. It's a hard thing to have. So that's histrionic. Now, I have also a narcissistic personality disorder where they need attention and they're very, very egocentric. It's me, me, me. I'm the best. You know, reminds you of some politicians. I have the answers. You don't have the answers. I have the answers. I'm better than anybody else. You know, pay attention to me. I'm the one who needs the attention. And they're very, very attention-getting as well. So they need admiration, and they're egocentric. That's narcissism. We see a lot of it, actually. The avoidant personality disorder is when they're inhibited and they're inadequate and they don't feel like they're good, and so they're always saying how bad they are, and they can't make any headway in society because they're really not able to think of themselves as a person who deserves it. You know, they're not good. I'm not good. I'm bad. I don't do good things. I do bad things. You know, no one likes me because I'm not good enough. I'm inadequate, and that's really not true, of course, but that's what they believe. Then you have the dependent personality disorder where they're clingy and dependent, and they want to be taken care of. They want people to take care of. They don't feel that they can take care of themselves, so they're always looking to kind of attach themselves to somebody else with a purpose of being taken care of by them. So they're dependent and they're clingy. And then you have the OCD, They need to have perfection. They need to be in control of everything, and they need to do everything over and over again. They have to make sure everything is right. So that's the kind of thing that we've already done. We've already discussed this, but it does make a difference. In a class like this, I'm trying to show you there are ways to help you to overcome. But I think in order to overcome, you really need to know what you're trying to overcome and the basis of why you're trying to overcome things. And so for that reason, I'm doing this. Now, disordered thoughts, we did a whole group of things on disordered thoughts. In disordered thoughts, it's all or nothing. We did a group of these. This comes from Burns' book, and he did a really great job in trying to classify what we do when we are under stress, how we act, what we think. And if we can class and we can understand what we are trying to think and what we are thinking, then that's a very great help to us in terms of helping ourselves to get over it. Now, the disordered thoughts that he lists, all or nothing thinking, which is also called black and white thinking. In other words, either I'm good or I'm bad, there's no in between. Either I did a great job, if I made a mistake, or something that I did was a mistake, that I did a bad job, I'm either good or I'm bad. I mean, there's no shades of gray. It's all good or all bad. No shades of gray. Then the overgeneralization. If something happens once, it's going to happen again. If I fall over something when I'm walking, well, I'm just going to have to watch where I walk because this is always going to happen. If I forget a line and I'm doing a play, well, this is always going to happen. You know, all of these things get blended together. The mental filter is that you pick a negative thing and you dwell on it. Well, I didn't do a perfect job. I mispronounced a word. Or I didn't do a perfect job because when I had my sales meeting, I missed something I wanted to say and I just forgot it and didn't say it. So therefore, I did a terrible job. Now, mental filter, pick on a negative and dwell on it over and over and over again. Well, my skirt and my blouse didn't match. Therefore, I was very poorly dressed. But you think about it all the time. You never let it go. No one else is thinking about it. Disqualification of the positive. You turn a positive event into a negative event. Yes, everybody said I did a good job, but they didn't understand this one mistake I made. And so therefore, I'm thinking about that. That ruined the whole thing. No one else is thinking about it, but the person who is doing this kind of thinking. You turn a positive event into a negative event. Jumping to conclusions, you make a negative assumption and you assume that that negative assumption is true. Well, I've got a lump on my wrist, therefore I've got cancer. No question about it. I've got cancer. It can't be anything else. And so you just assume the worst and you continue to assume the worst even if you have proof that it's not the worst. A fortune teller error. You imagine bad things happening. Everything that you imagine is going to be bad. I'm going to fall on my face. I'm going to forget what I'm doing. I'm going to flunk the test. All of those kinds of things. And we do that in every way. Depending upon what kind of a career you're in, you always manage to do something that's going to be bad. Now, magnify and minimize. That's where you blow things out of proportion. You take your good points, whatever they are, and you shrink them so they don't mean anything. But you take your negative points, whatever they are, and you magnify them so that they're a lot more important than they really are. Emotional reasoning is when you take your emotions as evidence of the truth. So you feel bad, so therefore things are bad. Or if you feel good, things are good. Whatever your emotions tell you, your emotions make the decision for you as to whether things are good or things are bad. You should never let that happen because most of the time your emotions are not to be trusted. Yes, they have validity. Yes, we all have them. And maybe they are okay. But on the other hand, they may not be. We tend to believe what we feel as if it's absolute truth, but it's not absolute truth. So that emotional reasoning is kind of like a false thing. Should statements. Should statements are you're always saying what you should have done. You should have done this instead of that. You should have gone to this college instead of that one. You should have been nice to this person. You should not have told somebody off. You should have done this. You should have done that. And you make your life miserable thinking about all of the things that you should have done as opposed to the things that you actually did. And you can't be convinced that what you actually did was okay. Then you label and you mislabel. That's the basis of your self-image. I'm not a good person, so therefore I have a bad self-concept. I have a bad self-concept because I don't deserve to have a good self-concept, and on and on and on it goes. Then there's the personalization. You assume responsibility for negative things. In other words, something went wrong. It must be my fault. Something happened. It must be my fault. I must be the one that caused this divorce. I must be the one that didn't do it right. I must be the one that made the mistake. Now, children do that a lot. When there's a divorce in the family or a marriage breakup, they always blame themselves, and I'm forever telling them it's not your fault. So therefore, I'm going to close it here because we're running out of time. We'll be doing something else next time. Please join me then.